Firstly, I would like to say hello to everyone, and thanks to Heavy Chef and to you, Siyas, for inviting me. So basically, I'm Thulani Headman. That's my original name. I come from Langa. My father is Cyril Ngugana Headman, coming from the Ngugana family, which was quite known of the jazz pioneers. So yeah, I was born 1986, born and raised Langa. Was fortunate enough to grow up in quite a lot of inspiring people. One of them is here behind, Vuyo, one of the well-known drummers of Cape Town. Abo Brenda Fasi, Ringo Madlingozi. So basically I grew up in front of musicians, and that's how I got into music. Basically my father was one of the best music composers, one of the greatest pianists Cape Town had. And I used to grow up watching this old man playing piano, and it was jazz. And I was young, I was like, ish, this man, every time we need to listen to jazz playing. And remember, like, way back then, it was 95, 94, there was this new sound that was pumping, which was more for us. And I was forced every time being taken to school in a car, we're listening to jazz. At home, we're listening to jazz. Every Saturday, we're listening to jazz. I ended up falling in love with the jazz because I wanted to play piano like my father. So that's when I started fiddling around with an old grand piano, which we still have at home, which is older than me still. And yeah, that's where I started fiddling with piano.
Okay, so can you tell us more about what is Bridges for Music and what you do and how did it come about as an idea and also, yeah.
Okay, so basically, before I start with Bridges for Music, I'd like to tell a bit of my story, my journey, just aside from my family, because it all adds up into the story. So basically, growing up, you know, from this wonderful family, my father being a musician and my mom being a Jehovah's Witnesses, it was quite a difficult one. My mom never wanted me to be in the music industry because she always had this experience from my father's side, thinking that I'll be exposed to alcohol, drugs, and all this bad stuff. So you know how Jehovah's Witnesses are very strict. I never had the freedom to go out. I was good at soccer. I was one of the first black guys after 1994 to be called up by, white-dominated teams, a couple of guys from the township. But because the trainings of the team were Thursdays and Tuesdays, I couldn't go to trainings because Jehovah's Witnesses had meetings on those days. Every day, I was one of those young boys that would knock on your doors preaching. Yes. And because, you know, I was growing from the township, I was a teenager. You know how our townships are. We don't have role models in the township. Our role models are the guys driving the BMWs there, you know, wearing the expensive clothes. And they've got everything. So, yeah, I had a role model myself. My life turned around, you know, in quite a bad way. I got involved in the wrong side of things, and I became one of the biggest guys well known in Cape Town as well. I ended up in Pollsmoor prison. I got sentenced. I was quite well known in Pollsmoor. My first time walking in there, everyone was screaming my name. That's how big I was in that shitty life. I was never a gangster. I was a gangster of money during that time. So that was always my drive, a bad drive even though. But however, I kind of like feel part of my life. That was the best time of my life. I'm not proud of that. However, I feel like if I hadn't experienced that moment of my life, I would never be where I am today. Because being in prison, being sentenced in prison, that's when I got my time to myself, asking myself some questions. I asked myself questions that I couldn't answer myself at that time, and no one else could answer them. And the answers actually lied upon me. I had to find the answers myself. No one else would answer that. And one of the questions that actually I had to myself was that, look, you are blessed. You know, you've got something that other kids don't have and what other kids would fight for having, which is coming from a family which is music-driven and, you know, being exposed to all these well-known people, you know, these musicians that were coming in and out of my house. And look, I was in this shitty life, which I was not supposed to. And I was like, why are you being so selfish, you know? Why don't you utilize this? There's other kids that would die for this, you know? And that's when, while I was serving my sentence, that's when I started realizing that I needed to change my life around. Before going to prison, I used to produce music using my father's synthesizer. I didn't know how to produce music on computer. But while I was in Pollsmoor serving my sentence, I got introduced to a broadcasting network, which was a program that was happening in prison. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's where I learned how to produce music on Reason. That's when I got introduced onto Reason while I was in Pollsmoor prison. And I remember when it was time for me to come out, I had made my decision that I needed to change my life. And I wanted nothing to do with crime. I told myself that I needed to change my life in order to be a good example in my community, to be the role model that are not there. And I told myself that I was going to utilize my status that I was in, because in our townships, like it or not, when you're coming out of prison, you're still a big man. That's the wrong mindset that's there. You know, young kids still respect these big guys coming out of prison as if like they are good role models where they're not. So what I decided to do is to utilize that status that I was in and open and start up a company, which was 021 Records. And that's when we started and produced one of the biggest songs in South Africa, which was Ndasuke Nkulule. That's when
actually,
DJ
what
Fosta
inspired
got
that?
in on.
Ndasuke Nkulule? What inspired that song, actually? Yeah.
Okay, so basically what inspired that song... Okay, so basically that song, how it started up, it was a partner of mine from the 021 Records. He just came from an initiation school. So coming from an initiation school, you wear your cap, you have to wear your blazer. So we had just produced one of a song that we were starting out, and there was a party that we wanted to try out this song. So he was still Ukwala.
Yeah.
So we went to this party, and there was this song that we were trying out, which was playing. So while it was playing, you know that Amakwala are not supposed to dance and stuff like that. So he was like jamming, and then he was teasing, saying like, "Ingasken kulule." So I said to him, "Ask us to storom." So that's how the song came about. But now, while we were writing the song, we knew that people were gonna have their own.
Yeah.
So that's when, in my verse, I kind of like turned it around. It said, the last part, I think I said like, "Kululi skip as bono pake kangakanani." So we know, we knew it's gonna get there somewhere, somehow. And actually, that song caused us troubles, because everywhere we go, we used to, like on the stage, being thrown like bras and that stuff, yeah.
Okay, just to give people more understanding about Bridges for Music, and you spoke about the positive and the negative role models in our townships. So as Heavy Chef, the reason we decided to bring these events is because we want more positive role models, want more good stories, as Thulani have said as well. So when did you start at Bridges for Music, and did you start it alone, or it was an idea from prison? What happened?
Okay, so basically, while running 021 Records, you know, we were kind of like one of the groups that inspired a lot of guys to start producing from home, stop knocking at the big record labels, which we felt like the industry was monopolized. We kind of like disrupted the whole industry. You know, I remember one of our first songs. That's how actually Kulula got, you know, scattered. We didn't want to utilize the record labels. We identified a new model. We were utilizing Bluetooth Mixit. At that time, we gave the song out for free to people who didn't mind about generating revenue at that time, because we wanted to create a demand and let the promoters have chase after us in order to generate revenue out of performances. And that worked well for us, because after 2 months we had produced the song. It was #1 on 5FM. We don't know how it got there, but it was through the university channels that we were pushing. So basically the whole idea of starting the 021 label or company was to bring a platform for the youngsters, for the young talents coming from our disadvantaged communities, to kind of like give them the push, you know, and inspire them, you know, to push and work hard to do something out of themselves. So basically in 2012, while that was running, I got introduced to Valentino, who had actually at that time came down to South Africa on his personal visit. And Valentino basically had a background of being a promoter in Ibiza. So he used to run a big club called Amnesia. It's still around in Ibiza. And he had taken a sabbatical year on his time, and he came down to South Africa. While touring in Langa, he got introduced to me as the quite inspiring guy in the music industry. And we started talking with Val, you know, and I remember after being introduced to him, we stayed in contact, and then Val had this idea of bringing or utilizing his networks to bring all these international DJs to come down to Langa or to Cape Town and start inspiring, and sharing the stories. Because one thing that we found out is that as much as we might be going through certain challenges here in South Africa, or I should say in Cape Town, artists in Europe are actually going through the same challenges.
The same challenges that we're facing.
And we actually don't know about this stuff because we don't talk about this stuff. We don't share, this. So we saw this as a good platform whereby we could bring these world-renowned artists to come down and actually share their life journey stories within the music industry, with the upcoming artists. And in 2012, we started the first workshop at Gugas Tebe.
Okay.
And yeah.
So also you've hosted DJ Black Coffee, if I'm not mistaken, Ed Sheeran, including Zolani Mawola, Euphonic. So what was their role? Are they coming to do a talk or a masterclass? What happens?
So basically, actually, Black Coffee was in the very first workshop, and the idea was to kind of like bring someone that the young guys can relate to, and basically they would share their knowledge, do masterclass, share their knowledge on how they got to where they are, how they started, and most importantly, we also need what kind of like connected the up-and-coming managers with his manager, because sometimes if you want to be a manager, it's not wise to ask managerial questions to Black Coffee, so rather link with the right people to answer those questions. And then after some time, after hosting these workshops, because we were bringing like your Skrillex coming down with this fancy equipment and showcasing to these young kids, and we felt like it was unfair because it was kind of like showing a young kid lottery money, I mean a poor kid lottery money, and then stepping out with it. And then that's when we kind of like came about with an idea of building our own space where we could kind of like equip it with all these fancy equipment, or I shouldn't say fancy, but expensive equipment that's necessary, in the real world. Okay.
So basically you guys are bringing resources to people who are aspiring DJs as well as artists. Thank you so much for making time, man.